Hello, and welcome to this Paycheck special edition video podcast. I'm Rob Parsons, and we're live from the show floor here at HR Tech 2024. Joining me today is Michael Woodhead, the Chief Commercial Officer at FinFit. Michael is a seasoned sales and marketing leader who drives business development and profitability by guiding branding, sales, marketing, and creative teams to success. Before joining FinFit, he ran a consulting practice, collaborating with various clients, including startup, SaaS companies, large enterprises, nonprofits, and municipal governments. Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Rob.
So the first thing I want to talk about is really just the show floor. What you're seeing, what trends, what's interesting, what are the highlights?
Oh, well, so the trends are easy, right? It's artificial intelligence. That's what everybody's talking about. It's the only thing anybody wants to talk about. I think human resources executives are measuring their obvious excitement with what the power of artificial intelligence tools and capabilities can do to transform and in fact disrupt the existing systems.
Yeah.
So they're measuring, I think, the excitement that they have about that with very real questions about compliance, governance. What do you do with generative AI that learns on your models and learns on your data? And then what are the questions that need to be answered about how does AI that learns on your data maybe remove a competitive advantage that you might have in the marketplace today, right? So I think the trend is, while there is tremendous enthusiasm and excitement about artificial intelligence and the tools, so a measured and thoughtful approach to how do we implement those in our businesses.
So is there a level of impact coming from the changing workforce as well? We know technology is going to keep moving. I've got to adapt. But we've been seeing a lot of issues around, not issues, but evolution. Mm-hmm. Millennials moving into leadership roles, management roles.
That's right.
Gen Z coming
God help
online.
us, but yes.
Yes, with different expectations and different things going. Gen Alpha, right around the horizon.
Yeah.
What impact are you seeing with that changing workforce?
Well, so I don't think that these things are converging, accidentally or by coincidence, right? I think you're absolutely right. I think, one of the major driving forces behind technological disruption is the dynamically changing workforce, right? Millennials are in leadership positions. We are all welcoming Generation Z into the family, right? Into our workforce family. And I think that what millennials have taught us and what we have had to learn from millennials, and certainly more true today for Gen Z than it even was for millennials, is how specific and how responsive human resources tools need to be to an individual worker, right? The millennials came into the workforce and they were like, hey, these traditional ideas about how we lead people and how we motivate people, they don't work for me. They don't work for my generation. I have different priorities. And if you want me to be an active, productive team member, then you are going to need to change the way you serve benefits to me, the way you serve leadership lessons to me, and the way you develop me as an employee. And so it's no surprise, I think, that our human resources tools are becoming more proactive, more predictive, less reactive, and more serving an individual employee than an overall organization, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And it really, something I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen it, there's more expectations from the business on what you need to do. And I think a lot of that is we're seeing financial stresses, maybe new and different and maybe more challenging financial stresses. They're impacting how my workforce is performing.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what financial wellness or illness can do to an individual when they're trying to be a productive member of a workforce?
Well, so, as you know, at FinFit, that's the problem that we are here to help solve.
Right.
The financial stress in the everyday American worker and the negative downstream consequences that overwhelming financial stress can have for an organization. Obviously, the ravages on an individual can be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Living paycheck to paycheck, not knowing what you're going to do if the simplest financial emergency, which is coming, by the way,
it is,
happens to hit at the wrong time. And how does that challenge your food security, your transportation security, your housing security, the hierarchy of needs, and so at FinFit, what we want to do is we want to provide the resources and the financial wellness tools that workers need in order to navigate what can be an extremely difficult, challenging environment living paycheck to paycheck. And so, you'd ask specifically about what the, what we think the consequences are in the workforce. And so it's obvious, right? Increased levels of absenteeism, increased levels of presenteeism, increased turnover. When a financial emergency hits, you do not have the means to navigate or solve that, and it costs you maybe your ability to show up for work that day.
Right.
And if you can't show up for work, now maybe you are out of a job, and now you've got a bad situation that's turned into a catastrophe, right?
So tell me, how does FinFit alleviate that? How does that come into play, and how as a business do I implement that? How do I make that happen?
Yeah, well, so we take a novel approach. Financial wellness as an industry has been around for 40 years, probably. And despite the best efforts of a lot of very well-intentioned both entrepreneurs and corporate benefits managers implementing financial wellness tools, the problem's just getting worse. And so what we had to realize, and what we've come to recognize at FinFit, is that we're not solving the problem with the traditional approach.
Okay.
And so at FinFit, we've had to take a novel approach. And so as a result, we are products forward, we are outcomes based. What we do and what we pride ourselves on doing is we meet the employee where they are with competitive financial services. In fact, financial services that they do not have access to through traditional financial institutions. I mean, look, over the last 50 years, the traditional financial services industry serves the everyday American worker less and less every year. Unfortunately, middle-class Americans are, they don't have access to financial services. The LMI community is not served by the banking world. Financial services are either unavailable or they're unfair. In other words, they're usurious fees and they're too expensive. And so what we do at FinFit is we make fair, affordable financial services a right of working Americans, and we work with employers to provide those services into workforces.
That's so important.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the softer side. I'm an employee.
Yeah.
There's some stigma about needing help. There's some stigma about being in a financially challenging situation. Mm-hmm. As an employer, as a manager, how do I overcome that, or how do I point Michael in the right direction?
The most important thing is to lead with empathy. So I think one of the reasons why the financial well-being industry has struggled to solve the problem for the last 40 years is we have taken a very didactic approach. You're the problem has been the approach, right?
Okay.
Right? If you were just more financially knowledgeable, if you just managed a budget better, it's so easy. Just spend a little less than you make, and at the end of the day, you're going to be fine. Well, I mean, the reality is that there are structural disadvantages that are plaguing the American worker today. It is more expensive for someone who makes less money and is subprime to rent the exact same apartment as it is for somebody who makes more money and has prime credit. Right? It is more expensive to turn on your utilities. It is more expensive to buy a car, if you can even qualify for the credit that you need to buy a car, right? And so while it is true that there is fundamental learning that needs to happen in order to help all Americans ladder up into financial resiliency, it's also unfair to not acknowledge the structural disadvantages, right? So our approach at FinFit and the employers that we work with, we encourage leading with empathy, understanding that yes, there are behaviors that can change, but at the same time, not everything is always the fault of the individual employee who's struggling with their financial resilience. And so we meet them where we are. And we provide compassionate tools and resources. And we speak their language. We take everything, we make it at eye level.
I love that. I want to switch it up a little bit now.
Sure thing.
I'm an employer that's offering FinFit. Mm-hmm. It's working.
Yeah.
It's the positive side. What's the difference I'm seeing in employee engagement, in retention? What are the benefits to me as a business owner to make this commitment?
So fantastic question. And in my role, I really appreciate that question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about the things that we are most proud of in our company, which is the outcomes, like the difference that we make in the lives of individual employees. I mean, I will say at FinFit, our primary focus, and this is part of my role at FinFit as the Chief Commercial Officer, is to make sure from a product and a platform strategy standpoint, we focus myopically and with great discipline on solving the problem for the individual employee. Because we know if we do that, we will drive the outcomes we need to drive for our employer partners, and the sales and marketing will take care of itself, right? And so we focus on solving the problem, and the way we know that we're solving the problem is through a series of outcomes. For example, the average employee that uses the FinFit platform sees an over 40-point increase in their credit score. So imagine how transformative that can be for somebody, who is going from subprime credit to now they can qualify for an automobile loan, or maybe the goal of home ownership is now available to them, right? We also see a 180% increase in those who establish savings accounts and then contribute to those savings accounts, right? So that's a substantial, meaningful difference that we're making in the lives of employees, right? So, these outcomes, we save over $1,000 on average per year for employees in interest rates and in interest payments for what is for them right now not affordable credit solutions.
It's like a raise.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's hopefully the way we look at it. What we want to do is put more discretionary income into the pockets of working Americans so they can drop those into savings accounts.
Yeah.
Because the only lifeline you have is savings, and we want to demonstrate that through our platform.
That's great. That's great. How now, and I'm asking this to everybody we're interviewing, I know financial wellness is a part of this puzzle, but if I'm a company that wants to be talent first, wants to be people first, really demonstrate I care and get people to understand that and want to work for me, what would be the top 3 things you would do?
Wow. So, we've talked a little bit about it already. I think personalizing the employee experience is really important. I just firmly believe as leaders, we owe our team the benefit of context. How does what I do matter? Nobody gets out of bed in the morning and wants to be terrible at their job. Nobody does, right? Everybody wants to win, fundamentally. And I think that if we can provide context, right? How does what you do make a difference in the overall power of the organization and the people that we serve? Context, meaningful context is number one. And then I think rewarding them with financial returns. We talk about the soft benefits a lot, and I get that, and it's meaningful. But at the end of the day, you have to reward people and you have to motivate people with finances. It matters.
It does.
So competitive compensation, I think, really matters. And then I would say the third thing is giving people a path to growth. Making sure that they understand how by contributing and by being rewarded by the organization, they are also developing themselves both personally and professionally.
It's a great answer.
So, Thank you.
So look ahead now. Look in your crystal ball.
Okay.
It's 2027,
I have no crystal ball, by the way, Rob.
None.
If I had a crystal ball, I would already be a wealthy
retired,
man. That's
yes.
right. All right. Anyway, let's go.
You're on the show floor.
Yeah.
What's different? What's changed in 4 or 5 years?
Well, hopefully, FinFit, instead of supporting 20% of the American workforce, is now supporting 50% of the American workforce. So hopefully, that's the first thing that's different. So I think providers like Paychex, who are doing such an amazing job of rethinking the power of the paycheck. How do we make the paycheck a central point of focus for the employee, so that their paycheck is less about just a way of communicating value back to an employee, but more about a way of allowing the employee to have an entry point into other tools and resources through human capital. So I think that the evolution of that and the disruption that artificial intelligence brings to that is going to be significant. But I also think this idea of overall well-being. So FinFit focuses on the financial well-being component, right? But we work with partners on the overall well-being area to share data, right? And to take individual employee data and draw conclusions about the benefits that, for example, reducing financial stress has in an individual employee's overall health and well-being, right? You don't have as many slip and falls, right? You don't have as many workplace accidents when you have a reduced financially stressed workforce. Not only are they more productive and they're more present, but they also are not inclined to cost the company or themselves as much money in these incidents and accidents. We also feel like there's going to be an overall improvement to health and well-being for an employee as well by reducing financial stress. So bringing all these data points together in a converged and cohesive way for employers to both know more about and be more predictive with how they lead and manage their workforce. So I think those are the things, yeah.
Those are great things.
Yeah, they are.
Michael, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah,
this was tremendous.
Pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
And thank you to our listeners. As always, please stay happy and healthy.